Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 4
Correct.
of Pop Culture Therapy. I am Cruellica Kain.
I'm Advent Nebula.
And we are here to talk about, well, our main topic du jour is a therapy chair session on fandoms. We're going to talk about the different crazy fandoms. But beforehand, let's catch up on what we've been doing in the last week.
For me, just focused on one big event. Anybody who knows me knows I'm a sports fan. I watched the All-Star game for hockey. And I watched the Super Bowl. Oh, God. All-Star game, it was on Saturday night, so I had it taped, watched it. Pretty fun. I like the way the NHL does the All-Star game now, where they have the 4 conferences and have like a little mini tournament, and then comes out best of the All-Stars from one division of the 4 divisions in their conferences come out and win. Nice and simple, really entertaining. Shootout was like 10-1 victory for the Atlantic Conference over the Central. But the Super Bowl. Now, anybody who knows, me personally knows, I play fantasy football. I talk to other football fans online. I get really into the season, all the players and everything. I wasn't enthused about a Los Angeles, New England Super Bowl. Really didn't want to see New England get another Super Bowl, but I had this gut feeling going in before the game started. Pretty much when the matchup was determined, controversially, especially the Rams shouldn't have been there with the Saints and the bad pass interference call. Everybody's kind of on that. I'm still salty about that. But with that matchup, I just had the feeling, oh, this game's going to be a blowout by the Patriots. Sit there, watch the game. 3-0 at halftime. Fourth quarter, 3-3. When the game ended, 13-3, I'm just like, I think I've watched one of the most boring games, and I'm a person who actually enjoys defensive football, but dink and dunk football and the Patriots' way of playing football bores me to tears. Yes, Brady, you're the greatest football player that's ever played. Belichick, you're the greatest coach, but please, can some other team go into the next couple of years, just dethrone the Patriots, make us all happy, except for the people in Boston, please? And that's my soapbox, and my week basically has been. I haven't really watched anything out of the first season of a rewatch of Big O. Pretty much enjoyed that, but really, that was my entire week and what I've really done outside of my normal job.
I am allergic to sports. I actually find that I'm personally scared. Well, that's not true. I like hockey. I like baseball. So I'll watch them. If somebody says, hey, we got tickets for a game, I'll go there. So watching your passion, which you get to hear the passion, it's so hilarious because I saw the scores throughout the day, just kind of seeing, oh, who's going to win? Not that I really cared. And when I saw it was 3-3 up to the 4th quarter, I'm like, okay, either they're playing really well together or nobody showed up. So I'm guessing from his enthusiastic rants that nobody showed up. So moving on that pop culture to what I've done, he's done more than me, admittedly. This week, real life has pushed everything to the back seat. I work in human resources for a space company, and so human resources is always crazy. That's why I like to use video games, movies, and anime, and everything else in the universe to take my mind off of real life. And unfortunately, I didn't get to do that except for I have watched so much Doctor Who. Kaiji Okami, or Dr. Kain if you see him online. He has made me watch so much Doctor Who recently.
Unfortunately, you got to suffer through the Colin Baker era, which I hate.
Oh, God. Colin Baker is by far the worst doctor in my opinion, and I had very strong opinions about other doctors until then. But moving on, that's what I've been doing, and that's what I anticipate I'll be doing for the rest of this week outside of other fun stuff. But I promise next week, before we do our next therapy session, I will have a little bit more updates on the anime I'll be watching, because I'm going to be doing a binge of all the different series, because I actually am looking to add a couple of series because I saw some that just started airing that I really want to start watching.
Well, not only that, both Crunchyroll and Funimation ended up adding some new stuff to their catalog and just added like 6 to 7 episodes of stuff I didn't think was going to come in.
Well, exactly, because we're actually, tomorrow, I'm hoping, we're going to catch up on watching more Boogie Pop and others. So that's what I'm looking forward to. And then in 2 weeks, for all of our Toku fans, we're finally going to be finished with Lupin versus Pato Ranger. So I'm looking forward to that. And I do know, outside of anything we talk about in Pop Culture Therapy in regards to Toku, we are going to be doing an end of series video, probably with Bloodborne Chrysalid and Silver Quill.
Yeah. Neither of us, and actually none of us, has really watched anything on Zio. Ended up kind of looking on some spoilers. Found out Decade came back. I'm like, oh, joy.
I'm not surprised. I'm honestly not surprised. But I will binge it at some point just to have some common sense of what's going on, but otherwise,
at this point, we're better off just binging X8. I would welcomely watch that show again.
Exactly. So, on to our topic du jour. We are actually going to do a true therapy session, not just use the name therapy, on fandoms. With recent news that has been going on, and I'm not going to highlight the news because I really don't think it, while it needs attention and we'll reference it throughout, I don't think it needs the same level of attention that's been getting online.
Yeah, the attention online, just go on to my Twitter, at Advent Nebula. I posted a very, very detailed blog post. It's about a 30-minute read that somebody did that accumulated all the events that have been going on with this topic, which we will get to as we get into the topic.
So, with fandoms, the reason why I want to put them in the therapy chair is there's so much that goes on with a fandom. The core value of a fandom, as you saw with Advent's rant earlier on sports, which was excellent preference to this entire thing, is there's 3 core values with any given fandom for an actual fan, not just the fandom itself, but for each fans in that particular fandom. It's passion, enjoyment, and loyalty. While they all probably could be one and the same, they're very, very different. There's passion in you love the original works, you love anything that's ever been done, or you even love the modernizations of original stuff. For enjoyment, you enjoy what originally has been done. Once again, you enjoy the changes and you enjoy the new stuff. Loyalty, same reference. Good or old, current, or changes. You're just so involved in it. The problem with fandoms, as Advent Nebula just demonstrated, is you hold true to one particular piece of it. For just listening to Advent's talk about the sports, he has huge enjoyment for the sport of football. He has a lot of passion towards it. However, his loyalty is what is disjointed. And that's usually the problem that you see in a lot of fandoms. You're loyal to certain sports teams if it's sports. You're loyal to certain animes if it's anime. You're loyal to certain movies if it's Star Wars. And that's where the problem lies. And we tend to take it too far in our enjoyment of as a fan for a fandom. And then now with the modern age of the internet, we all almost have this hive-ish mind where we almost work together and we can either help a fandom or hinder a fandom.
And one aspect, and this goes into fandoms, but also goes into certain respects of what your preferences are. Gaming fandom. I look at the console versus PC gamers. This has been a feud going on for quite a long time. I'm kind of neutral on it. I don't get into the mobile side. Yes, I do play some mobile games, but it's kind of null and void when you really look at the bigger core of gaming. PC gamers tend to stick way too loyal. They won't listen to the console gamers at all. But on the flip side, the console gamers can be the same way. They don't like to listen to the PC gamers. They have a preference for a certain console. I'm not one of those. I don't really play a lot of PC games, mainly because I don't have a machine powerful enough to play them. Yes, there are some PC games I dabble into, but they're more on the low spectrum, visual novel, or older games that have been ported to PC that were console games, or even console games that are running through an emulator. I have Sony, and I have Nintendo consoles. I don't have a Microsoft console because with Xbox, a lot of my interest just lies with the games that are presented. I would own an Xbox if there were games presented on there that would benefit me for my interests. But you just have these die-hard fans that just stick to one console, just stick to PC. And it just does not branch out ever. And you get into online arguments with people all the time. You see it all the time on social media. PC Master Race is a term that is used by PC gamers that just frustrates the hell out of me because they just won't let anybody have a different opinion other than their own. But then I see loyalists for PlayStation, I see loyalists for Nintendo, I see loyalists to Xbox. And I'm just like, guys, branch out. Look at the pros and cons. And if you look at it as a whole, we are all gamers. We're all enjoying the same thing. Let's not turn this into a fight.
Unfortunately, the downside with fandoms, and I will admit that the video game fandom, if you look at it as a whole for both PC and for console, and admittedly myself personally, I am pro console. I don't have the dedication to sit at a computer. But nevertheless, with this fandom being the lowest on their spectrum of, if we had to call it toxicity, that's exactly what it is. Video game fandoms are actually pretty mellow, but the downside is there is so much loyalist when you go to a certain brand, or there's loyalty to nostalgia. The one thing that is big currently, and I would say it's probably biggest in this genre and then another genre that we're going to talk about later, nostalgia. That is probably the doomsday device of all fandoms. If you go on a fandom and have to defend why you like something new to others that prefer, I like it back in the day, I like the way it was before, then you're losing your crowd. And that's where it always takes the enjoyment out for you. So with video game fandoms, if I had to put them on a therapy chair, all I would do for all of them, console, PC, no matter which version they are, my question would be, why do you love it? Do you love it just because it's convenient to you? Do you love it because they make quality games? Or do you love it because you feel like you have some sense of superiority compared to everyone else? And I can guarantee you, the answer is probably going to be number 3. So with that said, do you want to announce our next fandom?
Yes. And this one's not that bad. It has a pretty dedicated fan base. It's Josh Whedon's fandom.
Oh, God. Josh Whedon's verse is probably an insane fandom. One that I never really even dabbled in. I've seen all of his stuff.
Yeah,
but
I've dabbled into really Buffy, Angel, and Firefly. That's about it. Yes, I'm one of those people that was disappointed with Firefly's cancellation. Like that, it at least got a wrap up with a movie. That's probably the best thing that you could ever happen with a series getting canceled the way it did. And it was kind of unexpected, but it was a nice send-off for the series. But you just have these die-hard fans that are very loyal to Whedon. And his work, yes, it's got a real niche. And with that, it's got certain fans that are going to gravitate towards it. But they go in a little too hardcore at times. And he's had shows canceled like Dollhouse. Ran for a few seasons. He had forewarning and conclusion with that. And you see the fandom just go in and they have their theories, their shipping, their all this stuff. Even though there's existing properties continuing on in comics. And then you have the Avengers, which you're gotta start to see that Whedon wasn't the competent writer he was. Especially with Age of Ultron, and then when he had to try and save Zack Snyder's abomination of Justice League, and that just was a mess. So I don't understand whether he has these defenders at times. His work for me is enjoyable, but it's not that rock hard, solid fandom that you get these gung-ho people for.
Well, the Whedon has done something that's amazing when it comes to a fandom. He is two things when you look at it in a pop culture perspective. He saw what made people like Alfred Hitchcock, Stanley Kubrick, even people who are still around. Oh God, now I can't remember their names. Even George Lucas, or who did Indiana Jones?
Oh yeah, that was George Lucas and
no. God, now I can't remember his name.
George Lucas and Steven Spielberg together.
Spielberg. I don't know how I'm missing names. I think I'm just remembering way too many people these days. But when you have excellent creators, dynamic minds, directors, as those four, Joss Whedon, he didn't start in the most illustrious career. He started with Alien 3, which if you've ever seen that movie, it's bad, but there's some kind of slight enjoyments on it.
And then Alien Resurrection was where he started his film career, actually.
And so,
but we got Buffy the Vampire Slayer after it.
Yes, but I actually like the original movie. But nevertheless, he knew how to not only create stuff using other existing properties, as many of those directors did, he also knew how to promote the hell out of it. He didn't do this huge promotional campaign. He kept it niche. He kept it connected with his core audience, who developed this great word of mouth that created this strong passion. And that's why that fandom is not toxic. It's actually this strangely well-oiled machine that scares me at times, because if you say, well, you weren't a fan of it, or of something that he did, or you've never seen something that he did, you get this shock and awe from any of his hardcore fans of, how did you not know? And it's an amazing thing when you look at it. Even if you look at it as like a psychologist or something, you're like, wow, how do these people look at this in such reverence? And it always amazes me with that fandom. I actually have to give Joss Whedon a lot of credit, because in my personal opinion, he's not that creative, but he knows how to find the right people to maximize his potential and get it out there. And if not for that, he would have never succeeded to where he did. So kudos to creating such an interesting fandom.
And he's written for superhero comics of existing properties for Marvel and DC both. I give him props because he's stayed true to the characters the way they've been. And he's actually brought in people that were fans of his just into the comic realms itself, just to keep up to these characters.
Well, exactly. So the third fandom we're going to go with is, it's an interesting conundrum, because for us specifically, while we like the fandom, we're not diehard fans as many others are, but we do have a personal friend who is in many of our videos or different things like that, who is in this fandom as a very popular reviewer, and that's Silverquill. The Brony fandom is this interesting hybrid, because in truth, I am still amazed it even came into existence, because the show, while it's great, it has dynamic characters, it has dynamic stories. The Brony fandom came out of nowhere, based on a show that if you were alive during the 80s and were a kid or old enough to actually watch shows in the early 80s when the original My Little Pony aired, it made no sense. It had no plot, it had no story, it had no developing arc. And then you come with the modern day My Little Pony, and it's created something where you have bronies now. You have adults that I feel are almost more invested in a show than the actual core audience it was made for.
It really is, and it's kind of an interesting thing, though, just as an outsider, that walking into a convention and looking at it, you actually see some really passionate fans. Yes, I watch the show from time to time because it does have good writing. It does have good character development. And you look at it and you're like, well, I can enjoy this just as a person that enjoys good stories. And then you look at the fandom, you're just blown away on how invested these people are on this show. And it seems like the adult audience is the bigger fans than the actual target audience.
And compared to all of the fandoms that we're going to talk about today, because we can go back and then when we move forward we can do this, the core audience, or like the diversity of demographics or age groups, or even all of the different like cultural groups that are interested. With video games, you know your cultural group. It's typically between 13 to 40, with some older gamers who do play, but that's the core group. When you come into the Josh Whedon group, it's pretty much between 25 to about 60 is his group. It's an older audience. When you come to the Brony, yes, you do have kids who enjoy it, because when we've gone to conventions with Silverquill, I've seen little girls, little boys that are about 10, 12, 13, that are that audience, or even younger, who enjoy it. And then you go up to about 60-year-olds, which it's not a judgment, because, one, we're all pop culture fans. We should never, ever judge anyone for what they enjoy, because we're not assholes. But it's so fascinating to watch, because when we get into our next topic, while we do have such wide disparity against the people who enjoy it, the Brony fandom is so impressive, and it's so, for the fans themselves, they're very united. I know people have talked about some toxicity, and I've seen those comments, I've seen those arguments, and I will say, from an outsider looking in, while there are some toxic elements, because I'm not immune to it, I've been on Silverquill's comments page, I've seen other articles, and I've seen all the terrible things that have happened at the same time. But there's so much positivity in this fandom that I actually kind of feel jealous. And from a therapeutic standpoint, the fandom is really nice.
Yeah.
Where Joss Whedon is an excellent marketer, this Brony fandom that started from nowhere created such a beautiful environment, at least to me.
Yeah, and where the toxicity level's probably about the same at the Whedon level. It's just with just these select core groups of fans that you're always going to have in the fandom.
Well, yes.
But now we're going to start getting into fandoms that start going on to where you're going to start getting some toxic fans.
Yes, and one thing I will mention before we move on, for all the people who do watch who are huge Brony fans, or who are even Whedon fans, or video game fans, and then later fandoms that we're going to talk about, if you feel like you're in a cliquish environment and you're watching people who are overly toxic talking about it, which we know who those people could potentially be because we're all online, walk away from them. Enjoy the fandom, and if you can't avoid the toxicness, do so. Just love the core of what it means, because I know watching Silverquill when he works on his reviews, or watching any of the other reviewers do what they do, I see the passion and I see the fans' passion, and I don't want anyone to lose that because there's a few assholes out there who are trying to get their 15 seconds of fame.
And as we transition in, this is where you start getting some real toxic fans.
Oh, God.
Toku. And with Toku, you have your fandoms that are just strictly the Japanese, and you have the culture that started with Power Rangers. And where a lot of the arguments in this fandom come with is the pure people are just the Toku, the pure people are just the Power Rangers, and the people who just don't understand that there is an existing culture in this fandom that's not just American, that's not just Japanese, that it is all one fandom in upon itself.
Well, I think the difficulty with this particular fandom of Toku is American audiences who don't know about the core Japanese elements think that Toku is simply for kids because Power Rangers, Beetleborgs, I can't remember all the shows that came out, even Dragon Knight when it came out.
VR Troopers.
VR Troopers. They were all geared to children in America. However, when you go to many of the older series in Toku, when you go to Beefighter Kabuto, or you go to Ryuki, who was Dragon Knight in America.
Kamen Rider Blade.
Exactly. Or you go to so many of the other shows. You even have Garo. And you find that, well, their core audience, yes, is child-friendly. The shows themselves are so dynamic and geared towards parents and children alike, kind of like current modern animated movies.
Yeah, it's
like Ralph Breaks the Internet and shit like that.
Zootopia is probably the perfect example of that with the Breaking Bad joke they threw in there.
Exactly. So Tokusatsu is very particular. And then you also have, so Tokusatsu, just like some of our last two fandoms that we're going to talk about, because I'm going to avoid one because I'm scared to
we can go on a whole episode on what we considered our toxic fandom. That's the most on its own, because I think that one needs a therapy chair session itself.
Oh, yeah, just a true therapy chair session for itself. So we'll just do 2 more for this video, or this podcast. But for Toku, you have 2 separate types, which you're familiar with as well, and I think Kaiji no Kami is familiar with. You have, not only do you have Toku, or mainly Sentai versus Power Rangers, you also have Toku versus Toku.
Yep.
Where you have classic Toku fans once again playing this nostalgia game of, well, it was better in the old days. It was better. You have excellent shows, which, yes, it's true. Dai Ranger, Jew Ranger, Kaku Ranger, Jetman, Flashman. Great shows.
Time Ranger and Abba Ranger I will consider in a group as well.
Exactly. But, and then you have the people who primarily hate the older shows because they were so simplistic, or they're not as dynamic as the current Toku. Or for Sentai specifically, or even for Kamen Rider.
Yeah, even for Kamen Rider. You have the people who like the more gimmicky the modern Kamen Rider is, as opposed the, and I want to say it's pretty much Blade to the original Kamen Rider, when there wasn't so much the gimmicks as it was the story writing. You have very diverse groups and their fandoms as well, and then you have people that will defend the Metal Hero shows and the older Kamen Rider shows, as they say, when Metal Heroes died with Toei, when they hit that off, they just stopped watching Tokusatsu in itself.
And it's amazing because I've seen it even with Ultraman. And while coming from that midpoint where I really started watching Toku around 2001, and I went back with Kaiji no Kami and watched a lot of the older shows, I can see why there is a split and why it can be so toxic, because there's so many arguments, there's so many purists, there's so much infighting for something, one, that was never made in America. 2, you can either watch it almost fully subbed, barely subbed, or not subbed at all, so you don't know the core value of the show. Or 3, you have 2 different mindsets watching it. Like, for example, I'm trying to think of a great show that Kaiji no Kami and I watched. Hurricaneer. Well, he likes Hurricaneer, and I know he's going to do a full review when it comes out, so I'm not going to bust in on his review or anything like that. When we first watched it, he was not as into it. He enjoyed it, but when I watched it alongside him, I could not stop watching. I loved the gimmick, I loved the characters, I loved the show, I loved the villains. Everything, in my personal opinion, worked perfectly. And then we have a show like Deca Ranger. He enjoyed it so much more than I did.
And then, for us as a group of a show that we've watched, Kyoruger. I'm the one that loved the show more than...
No, I loved it.
Yeah.
I have all the gimmicks.
Yeah, but I loved it more than Kaiju did. I think I enjoyed the show a little bit more than you, even though you own all the stuff. I just don't have the budget to afford all that stuff.
But you know who loved it more so than even you? Silverquill.
Yeah.
We go on this spectrum, and it's so many arguments because we like certain characters more than others and different things like that. And it's fascinating because fandoms are supposed to create... This is a great therapy session explanation. Fandoms, where you have those 3 core elements, passion, enjoyment, loyalty, you're also supposed to be able to have this conversation with others. To enjoy something fully, while you can enjoy it on your own, the benefit of a fandom is you have others that you can enjoy it with, that you can connect with, that you can communicate with. However, when you go online sometimes and you'll see this connection, there's so many pages that I'm on Facebook or on Twitter that I see this positive environment of connection, and then I'll look at others and I'm like, are you just really not connecting? Are you trying to troll each other? Are you just being complete assholes? Like, I know some people, for expressing their comments, they shall not be named, because if I do, I'll get everybody in trouble. They've gotten banned from pages, from forums, from anything, because they have a dissenting opinion that everyone in the world gets pissed off about. And that's a great example of toxicity.
Yeah. And the best example on this is with Q Ranger and Lucky. I have never seen in any Toku such a divide of love and hate of the main Red Ranger.
Oh, God.
Yeah, I personally, for myself, don't like the character. I just don't go into in-depth fighting with people online about it. I just say I found him to be a too hyper-go-lucky, underdeveloped Ranger, which he kind of was, and it was just probably because you had 14 characters to develop.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So, Tokusatsu is a hard one because there's, unlike Brony fandoms, there's a lot more, well, like Brony fandoms, there's a lot of positivity. Unlike Brony fandoms, because there's a long history of content. You have, if you take Ultraman as the first, you probably have about almost 60 years of... Actually, you have 60 years of content.
65 years of content to go over.
You have so much content there. So there's so much more opportunity to have this anxiety, to have this argument, to have this toxicity. And compared to some of our last two... well, we have one that will be a different episode, and we will talk about that at the end.
Yes.
However...
And this is going back to the fact that another show that's got a 60-plus year history that has a very divided fandom. Doctor Who.
Doctor Who, and I'm not going to spend as much time with this because our last topic really, for this particular podcast, really needs some time to be talked about. Probably about 10 minutes. Yeah. Doctor Who's fandom has been around for a long time. And we've currently come up to what? 14 incarnations. So William Hartnell was the first. Well, if you include others, there's probably more.
Yeah, there's 14 incarnations if you count the American movies. We're on the 13th Doctor.
Yes. With
the actual...
Jodie Whittaker.
With the canon Doctor.
So, starting with William Hartnell, ending with Jodie Whittaker right now. There is so much. There's so much that can be talked about. And if people want to hear more about this in a future podcast, we can go into further detail.
We can go into detail because the biggest thing is there's a very big divide between the classic and the new Who.
And that's where the toxicity comes in.
And then there's also a toxicity between Stephen Moffat and Russell T Davies runs with new Who. So you got two separate sets of toxicity that come in with the series.
And while there's a lot of positive elements that come with it, which any good fandom is going to have a lot of passion, enjoyment, loyalty. The loyalty is what initially made me very afraid to watch it. Because the loyalty was so emblazoned on the old Doctors, which I had up until probably late last year, never really watched a lot of. So my experience was Chris Eccleston on forward. However, I watched it because I wanted to give it a chance. I wanted to understand the world that it came in. And when I first started watching and told people at times, oh, I'm watching Doctor Who. Who's your first doctor? Chris Eccleston. Because everybody goes by who's your doctor. And I got so many looks of, oh, either pity or really? You're starting there? Or, oh, wow. Only 1 out of maybe every 5 people were happy I was starting somewhere with Doctor Who. Yeah. And that is why it's one of the top 3 most toxic. Even though it's so popular, so strong, that's why it's one of the top 3 toxic fandoms.
Yeah. For me personally, I got into Doctor Who before either Kaiju or Cruellica had, because out here, Doctor Who aired on PBS. And I got into Doctor Who just watching on the randoms at night, and got into it because I got to watch Tom Baker, Colin Baker, Peter Davidson, and Sylvester McCoy's Doctors. They never really aired the episodes in order except for the stories, so the Doctors were kind of jumbled around, so you never got the continuity. But for me, Sylvester McCoy was the first Doctor I watched, got really attached because it was his second season with Ace where I really started to get watched in there. So whenever I say that, that's my introduction to Doctor Who. I get a lot of cheers from a lot of the classic. And then I get into discussions with people who got in with New Who. They're like, who? So it's understandable why there is a toxicity on that, because there's people that are into the New Who that just will not touch the old Doctor Who because of the special effects and because of the cheap budget the show was on, even though it had a very good writing staff for some of it.
And that is a very good point on the flip side, is you have the New Who purists that also create their own toxicity because there's the glitz, there's the glam, there's the beauty of it. It's so much cleaner. It's so much more developed. And so I will admit that is what intrigued me. Well, the storytelling really intrigued me, but that helped to intrigue me. Because while I do like great special effects, there's something that helps when you're catching something where it's pretty and shiny and new. So there's so much toxicity with that, and it's impressive that a fandom has lasted so long with this toxicity. And that's why, before I announce our last topic, I'm going to say what we're going to do in a separate podcast. And that's going to be the fandom of Star Wars. I really think Pop Culture Therapy really needs to have a dedicated episode to the Star Wars fandom, because highlighting what people like about Doctor Who is almost going to be mimicking Star Wars. But Star Wars has its own problems because of its creator. But we'll get into that.
And another episode, because with Star Wars, I'll just preface out why this needs its own episode. You have the extended universe fans. You have people loyal to just the original trilogy. You have people that are loyal to the new continuities with Disney. You have people that are just loyal to it all. And then you have people that just pick out their own headcanons on stuff. So yes, Star Wars is our most toxic of all the fandoms, but it needs its own episode. But our second most toxic fandom, and this is really escalated if anybody's been on social media for the last, 2 weeks, with anime. The anime fandom's broken down to probably about 5 or 6 separate, really different categories of fandoms that just breach that toxicity level.
You have... So I'm going to call out the first one, because I really do think this needs to be highlighted for its fandom level. And it's the anime fandom God mod belief of voice actors. So I'm not going to talk about the specific voice actors, because I actually do know, not like overly personal, but I have chatted with other voice actors on friendly terms, and so I'm not going to get involved with that specifically, because one, it's not my place, because I was never particularly affected, but I do have to say I'm disappointed. But it goes along into the God mod thing, because what do you think about it?
It for me, the one topic that's coming up for this whole thing, there have been rumors around for about 12 years that I've heard about since I've been at cons, and apparently there's been stories for about 15 years on this. Like I said, go on to my Twitter, at Advent Nebula. There's 2 blog posts I've put up on there that break down the topic in whole, because I don't want to go into detail on it. But I've heard from con chairs, I've heard from con staff, I've heard from actual handlers about the behavior.
And the behavior is not just for who was highlighted online. Once again, I'm not going to get involved in that. But there's 2 aspects to the whole fandom of voice actor God mod, especially for the American anime fans. And that is due to the fact that you have 2 things. You have fans who treat voice actors with extreme reverence, which, don't get me wrong, I love what they do. They've created quality work. They've done good jobs. I've enjoyed every element of everything. So I'm not diminishing their right to feel proud and to feel cherished for what they do. However, so you have any age group. I'm not going to say kids. I'm not going to say adults. You have any age group who look at voice actors in a very reverent way. You then have, because anybody with a creative sort, and I live with somebody because I'm married to a person who has an ego, creative individuals have an ego. I am never ever going to deny that. I'm not going to diminish that. And due to the fact that there's an element of ego, you have a hand-in-hand type of fandom. You have a fandom of individuals who look up to voice actors and give them this blown up ego, and then you have the individuals with this blown up ego where it sails down, and they may take advantage of that. And that is exactly where I'm going to stop it, because and if people want to know more, I can go into that, because there are different topics that are related to this that are very serious within pop culture on all elements that I would like to do, but it is a very tough conversation. The second fandom that comes with anime, dub versus sub.
This is the one that just grinds my gears worse than anything else, because for me, I've watched tokusatsu for years, so I've been able to spot out bad Japanese acting. And these sub purists just say that the sub is the only way to go, because the acting in the sub is always going to be superior to the dub acting. Let me say this right now. No, it's not.
Can I actually say something really, really funny that would blow everyone's minds? Because guess what? No matter which flippin' language you watch it in, guess what it is? It's dubbed.
Yes, exactly.
Because if you actually know anything about anime, unlike American animation, when they animate after it's been voice acted. So the voice actors come in first. They do their work. The animators do their lip flaps. That's how you know, to base it around American words. The Japanese, though, because they know it's going to a wider spread market that are going to have multiple languages, multiple connotations, their lip flaps do not actually match Japanese wording. They match the open mouth, but it's not specific. And yes, you could say it's done because certain Japanese sentences are longer, so Americans have to fit it in somehow when they're doing their dubs. However, technically, both languages are dubbed. Yeah. I hate to blow your mind, people.
And I'm even going to break this down further on this subject. Go back and watch anything, and I'm going to specify this, watch it raw. Any anime from the 70s, 80s, up to about 98.
Oh, yes.
The Japanese never matched the lip flaps. No, it's well documented, well known. Americans, because of the way our animation is done, force themselves to match the lip flaps in dubbing scripts. But the Japanese didn't start caring about matching lip flaps until anime really broke out into a worldwide market. So that's another defense that the sub versus dub argument can't use. Because if you go back and watch it, I mean, there are some OVAs from the 80s where I've watched subs. There are times where the lip flaps don't even match speaking lines at all. You'll have no mouth movement and speaking going on when they're supposed to be spoken lines. It's actually quite funny.
And that's exactly it. And I'm not diminishing the fandom. So don't think I'm diminishing it, because everybody's going to have their preference on voice acting, preference on language. So it's not a matter of that. It's just a matter of it gets very toxic.
Yeah.
But to kind of shorten, because I don't want to keep this podcast too long because that's unfair to the world, to go over the 3 other fandoms. I'm going to do that in kind of a quick spree and we can talk about it, but the first of the other 3 fandoms within anime is ageism. The second of the 5 fandoms in anime is actually genre-based. And the third of the 3 fandoms is, once again, it's related to ageism, but it's also nostalgia. Old versus new. Old anime was the way it was. Nobody has created good anime in the last 15 years. Oh my god, how can you not like new anime? It's so great. All the old stuff is so lame. So ageism is young anime viewers versus old anime viewers. So you'll see this in anime conventions most prevalently. If you have a 16, 17-year-old anime fan next to a 50-year-old fan, what do they think of the 50-year-old fan?
They think they're pretty much an old curmudgeon that...
Or a creep.
Yeah.
They judge, and it's the reverse.
Yeah.
It's the reverse for that, which is so disturbing, because are we saying that anime should have an age limit? Not that it's a bad fandom, but I think it's kind of rude.
It is rude, because you're gonna... This is a group of fandom that, for Americans, started with people who are now in their mid-60s, some are even in their early 70s from the old VHS fan sub days.
And then you have, when the next rundown we'll take is good versus old nostalgia-wise. I hear this argument a lot from my loving husband that while there's some good anime series recently, there's not as much as there was in the good old days. But if you kind of think about the good old days, some of the animes we liked, if we watch them again, suck!
Yeah, and you also got to look at it, too, from a perspective, and I always look at this from an outside perspective to just see the whole box. Back in the older days, because of the hand-drawn animation, you didn't have as many shows that were going on, not as many production committees. Or today, they're churning out, and during some seasons, over 50 shows.
Oh, yes.
So you're going to, either way, you're going to have great content and you're going to have shit content. And you go back in the day, there are some really great shows, and then there's some that, just for nostalgia factor, that's why we enjoy them, but you show them to a fan that's getting in, or somebody that's an older fan but never watched that, they're going to look at you like, what are you trying to make me watch?
And this is how we're going to close out our podcast. The last of the fandoms for anime is the genre fandom. So this can be very toxic, and I'm not going to go into too much because we all know how it can be toxic. You either like mech, or you like romance, or you like action, you like horror, you like comedy. There are so many different genres of anime. There's probably at least 100 if you take in subcategories at the same time.
And then you top it off. You have people who are just loyal to a certain series within a genre.
Exactly. Like One Piece, Naruto, Bleach,
Gundam. And even Gundam breaks down even further.
Oh, yes. So that's it. And I don't want to say it's toxic in a bad. I want to say it's toxic in almost like a friendly rivalry.
Yeah, it is a kind of a friendly rivalry in it, but some of these loyalties, it's just toxicity of it. That it just, these people just, and I'm going to use One Piece as probably the best example of a series that will get forced onto you by fans that are just so dang loyal. I appreciate their passion. I really do.
Oh, you mean Kaiji no Kami, who pips it to literally everyone in the universe?
Yes. But then again, I do it with my love of a ton of cyberpunk shows like Psychopaths.
Or Lane. Or Technolize.
Yeah. I enjoy my cyberpunk, okay? But yeah, it's just, you have this real love for it. Ghost in the Shell, I really, really love it. Even Kaiju really loves Ghost in the Shell about as much as I do. But you gotta hit a point where you gotta learn. you're going over the edge.
And you have to respect other people's opinions. And I think in this modern day and age with the internet, because the internet has given us all carte blanche to be anybody that we can be. Look at us now. We have a podcast. This would have never happened when I was in high school. Mainly because the internet didn't come out until I was a sophomore. But nevertheless, if you could hear me, that's awesome. If you can't, I was just mumbling. So ignore me. Nevertheless, love your fandom. Stick with your fandom. Be a part of your fandom. Know that there's so many like-minded individuals out there that are cool, that enjoy you, that love exactly what you do. You're not alone. And that's the point of a fandom. At the end of the day, you all have the same passion, you all have the same enjoyment, and you all have the same loyalty to the core thing. Just respect each other, like each other, and give everyone a chance to be who they are. Because if you don't, all you're going to do is make someone who's scared to be a part of a fandom that we should all be welcoming everyone in. We should not be alienating people, which is what I see when, especially in these last couple of weeks with the voice actor controversy of people were just doing so many fractures, and it made me so sad because while there were people who did terrible things, as a core fandom, we need to support each other. We need to work together. And that, at the end of the day, no matter what you love, what you enjoy, be it sports, any element of pop culture, just give everybody else a chance. And protect each other within a reasonable realm. Argue with each other, but don't be dicks about it.
Yeah, and with that, have a great night. Next week we are going to just delve straight into Star Wars. This is a topic on its fandom that just needs a complete therapy chair session because, dear God, guys, what the hell's wrong with you?
Exactly. So this week concludes our therapy chair session for pop culture therapy of our various fandoms, and we look forward to chatting with you next week about Star Wars because all you people need a hug.